I'm joined here by a fantastic individual, someone who played football at the age of 15 and went on to coach some of the most fantastic teams in both the NSL and A-League. He's done every job in the country, including being a player, a coach, an administrator. He's done work in media, and he's raised 2 boys to play at the highest level and represented our country. None other than the great Branko Culina. Welcome, Branko.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sash.
So tell us, Branko, how did you fall in love with our great game?
Oh, geez, it was a long time ago. It was way back when I was a little boy living in Croatia. I would have been probably no more than 5 or 6 when I first started following the game, and I just loved. I loved playing, but obviously, just following the game from there. I didn't really play for anyone until I arrived in Australia when I was the age of 10, and on my very first day in Australia. On the, I think, 7th of January, 1968. I remember arriving in Melbourne by ship on the morning. It was a Sunday at 10 a.m. And in the afternoon, I was at Olympic Park watching Cross, not Sunshine, that cup competition. And in that rest of my life, basically, that was Billy Wojtek, who just stood out of all the players, and I followed him with the enormous interest for the best part of, until we started playing together at Melbourne, Croatia, or Essendon Lions, as they were called back then. And that was my introduction to football. So I was really about 10 and a half when I started playing the game. Because shortly after arriving in Australia, I joined Melbourne, Croatia, the juniors, and I was there for a while, and then moved on to the seniors, and from there on, basically went to Sydney, Croatia, many other clubs. But that was my beginning. Very first day arriving in Australia, going to watch. My beloved Melbourne, Croatia, as they turned out to be, and watching my idol Billy Wojtek play. So that was the beginning.
What a brilliant player he was! So creative, the ball at his feet, and he could do whatever he wanted with the ball. Obviously, he went on to represent our country. Fantastic individual. So, but you played first team football. You were just a baby as well. I think you played first grade football at the age of 15.
Yeah, look, I was just about 15, 16 actually, at St Albans, and they were in the first division. In those days, there was no NSL, there was just first division. And I was lucky enough to start early my football senior career. And I suppose you could say that whilst I've done reasonably well in my football career as a player. I was lucky enough to win the Victorian Rothmans Gold Medal back in 1985. I probably underachieved considering all that because I had some issues with my asthma problems, my eyesight later on. But no excuses. I probably just underachieved considering such a good start that I had playing at 16 for St Albans, and then going on to play for Melbourne, Croatia, and Victorian state team, all at a young age. All happened probably before I was the age of 20.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, you understood the game, and it wasn't too long. You like you rightly said, you went across to play at Sydney, Croatia, and then and other teams in Sydney before moving back to St Albans. Fantastic football factory in the heart of the western suburbs of Melbourne. Steep in the Croatian history of boys and the fathers and sons of playing in that that football factory of that club. Many good players have come out of that club. You went on to play for that side and then ended up coaching the same side. So talk to me about that first transition from having the boots to then setting up the cones and taking the drills.
Look, I think I always wanted to be a coach, but if you judge me at playing days, you would never think I was a coach, because I must admit, as a player, I was quite selfish. I was only interested in more or less myself, not so much about my fellow teammates. And even when I was a captain of the team, I probably wasn't the greatest captain going around, because I was more focused on my own game rather than my fellow teammates. Mm-hmm. But I was a very keen student, even though as a player, though, I remember going around different clubs, different football grounds back in those days, Middle Park, Olympic Park, Sunshine, George Cross's ground, and watching other teams train. I was also very big on going overseas and studying the methods back in those days and bringing them back home and writing all notes down on what impressed me or what I thought was important in those days. And I got my chance probably at the age of 28, 29, when I coached St Albans, when I more or less became a player coach. And I just thought I wanted to be a little bit different in the way I approached the game. I felt even at that stage that it wasn't only about your ability that you needed, because I had some very good coaches in my career, but I had some bad coaches as well. And what I did promise myself is that I wanted to be a coach that players would not be afraid of, someone who was there for the players, but also to understand that I wasn't there to be liked. I had to make a very big decision early on in my coaching, is that whether I wanted to be liked or whether I wanted to be respected. And it was a no-brainer. I wanted to be respected as a coach. Obviously, if you're liked, that helps. But if you ask me, do you want to be liked or respected as a coach, then I want to be respected. If I want to be liked, I want to be liked by my family and my friends. But when it comes to football, it's very much respect. And I was fortunate enough that at the very beginning of my coaching career, we had a fair bit of success. We in my first season, we made the top four and played in the Victorian State League Cup final. So for a first off, it was pretty good going. And from there, I suppose I was impatient. I wanted all things to happen quickly. And in my second season at St Albans, I was hoping that we would build on that and go better, but we had a poor start. And I think after round 4 or 5, I said, look, if we lose our next game, I'm going to quit. I'm just not going to hang around. And oddly enough, I think we were playing a team called Frankston Pines. We were losing 2-1, got a penalty in the 87th minute. We missed the penalty. We lost the game, and true to my word, I quit. The club was saying, don't be silly, don't be crazy, things will get better. But I made my decision. I said, I've got to stick to it, because when you make decisions, you've got to make sure you stick to them, otherwise you lose respect. And that was it. About 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a bit longer, 4, I got a phone call from North Geelong, who were in Division 1 at that stage, division lower. And I decided, well, why not? They lost their first 7 games of the season, and that particular year we finished mid-table, but for the following 2 seasons we were a remarkable side. We created Australian history by being the only club to have gone from Division 1 to Premier League and win it, both the Premiership and the Championship, all in the first year. And that was against some really good opposition, Brunswick Juventus, who had just been relegated from the NSL. So, it was a wonderful, wonderful chapter of my coaching, early coaching.
And another fantastic football factory out of Geelong, the North Geelong Warriors now, but a very steep history at that club, proud people and fantastic football over the years. And then obviously Melbourne Knights came knocking, and you get a stint in Australia's top flight. So that would have been a big honour.
It was. Look, those previous two clubs, both St Albans and North Geelong were also Croatian-backed clubs. I had played for both of them, and I'd coached both of them. I had previously played for Melbourne Knights, so this was my chance to coach them as well. But it was the wrong timing. I remember getting a phone call from the president at that time, and he said, we want you to, I think they were into about 6 to 7 games into the season, and said, would you be interested in coaching Melbourne Knights? I said, well, yes, but not at the moment because you've got a coach. Ken Murphy was coach at that time. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, but what if he wasn't? I said, well, if he wasn't, that would be a different situation. But at the moment, I'm not interested because you have a coach. A couple of days later, he rang me again and he said, would you be interested in coaching us now? I said, why now? What's changed? He said, Ken Murphy's no longer our coach. I said, well, that being the situation, then I'd be interested to talk to you. And that's how it started. But unfortunately for me and the club for that particular season, there was a lot of infighting at the board level. And the people that brought me in were great, but the people there were also people who didn't want me, who were in opposition to the president and the other board members. And there was an ongoing fight between them for the whole season. And it was no surprise at the end of the season that as soon as the season finished, I was released, sacked, whatever you want to put it. Yep. And my time, Melbourne Knights, was over. But it was just poor timing. But look, one thing that I will say that I enjoyed at Melbourne Knights, and I was probably, again, impatient. We had a very old team. People like Theo Salamides, George Hanna, Josip Biskic, Andrew Marr, they're all coming to the end of their career. And I decided to bring in the young guns such as Frank Juric in goals, Steve Horvath, Adrian Savinsky, David Savinsky, Vinko Buljubasic, Damian Wojtek. I brought this whole group of young players because I believed in young players. And I thought a mix of young and older and younger players would be a good way to go forward. Yep. But I wasn't retained, and a coach by the name of Mirko Bazic came. Yes. And the following year, they won the championship with the players that... the other player that, of course, that I brought in that gave him first stint was Mark Viduka. And I remember the club saying to me, well, we need senior players. We don't need youngsters. Why are you giving youngsters a go? I said, because we're not going to win anything this year because you had a poor start. I think the reason they changed Ken Murphy is because the team wasn't travelling well. Yeah. So I thought, well, we're not going to win anything this year. However, if we prepare for the future, then there's a good chance that we might do something with these guys. And, well, the history shows that Mirko Bazic at the helm with those players, yeah. Mark Viduka and the rest, they went on and won the championship, NSL championship the following year.
Yeah, so other quality players. I think you had Vaughan Coveney there and Oli Pondelliak.
Yes, that's right.
On the side, obviously.
Pondelliak, yeah. Oli Pondelliak was, yeah.
He was...
We're a very, very young side.
But he went on to play quality players. I mean, these kids could play. And this is the point about, maybe we touch on it. You played football, first team football as a young boy, right? You gave a shot to these other young boys to play in top flight football because you saw something in them that you give them 20 games and, they're going to improve 10, 15, 20%. So this is the idea of what a coach needs to do. And maybe some of the current coaches are fearful of doing so.
Yeah, I think that's sad. I mean, we talk about development of Australian football, but how are you going to develop players if you don't give them a go? And, I could have, in hindsight, I could have easily just waited until the end of the year and said to Theo Salamides and a couple of the other older players, thank you very much. You know, you've had a great innings and all. And maybe that could have been the right thing to do. However, I felt that if I waited till the end of the season, then these guys, young guys, would not have got those 15, 20 games that they needed to prepare them for the next season. And, I was of the opinion that the older player, when he reaches 32, 33, 34 or more, they're not going to get any better. They can maintain their standards, but they can only drop off. Where with young players, if you give them a go, you create the right environment for them, then what's the limit? There's no limit for them. And Mark Viduka, Frank Juric, Oli Pondaljak, Savinsky brothers, they all, Steve Horvat, they proved that. And it's funny, you know, like when Melbourne Knights celebrates that championship, it's not mentioned the fact that the squad was already there for them. It was saying, oh, well, Mirko Bazic put it all together. Well, if someone hadn't given those players 15, 20 games the year before, those players would not have been ready. But look, I take great pride in that. And even though I wasn't there, it gave me great satisfaction when they did go on and won the championship.
Of course, and this is the thing, giving a young Mark Viduka, hasn't got his driver's license, but he's playing first team football. This is now the mindset of a coach to say, what is this kind of player going to be able to do in 15 or 20 games? You don't know, but I'm willing to take the chance, and the time is right. But it's a mark of a good coach. So obviously you transitioned, you played for coached a number of other well-established clubs. You drifted into Faulkner and then back against St Albans. Before, I would say your one of your greatest stints as a coach when you moved to Sydney, and that Sydney United side. Boy, were they just quality. How did you make your way up to Sydney, Croatia?
Well, look, it was in between Melbourne Knights and Faulkner. Faulkner was just a bit of a pit stop for me because there was rumours that I was going to go to Sydney United, but they had done well the previous year. That a coach called Manfred Schaefer. And similar story actually happened as with Melbourne Knights. I remember working for a Melbourne newspaper, and I got a phone call one day on my desk from Sydney United, Ivan Simic, the president. And I rang that number back, and Ivan, we had a bit of a discussion, and I didn't know Ivan at that stage. He said, look, would you be interested in coaching Sydney United? And I thought, I said, but you guys have got a coach, Manfred Schaefer, you finished third. And he was very honest and said, look, Branko, we are looking at something different. Manfred's done a great job. He's a great person, but we feel he's taken us as far as he could. We need someone who can take us to that next level. And I said, well, why me? Why me? Because, I'm always of the belief that if you don't know where you're going, there's no road to take you there. Yep. And Ivan, for all that really impressed me about him and Sydney United, came up with a list of things that he thought I was the right person for the job. And he rattled off tactics, motivation, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, Ivan, fair enough. But I said, you've still got a coach. And he said, yeah, but we have made a decision that we would release him. I said, look, thank you for your call, but I'm not interested until it's officially. It wouldn't have been more than 2 hours later. I went out for lunch, came back, and there was another message saying, can you call Ivan Simic? I called him back, and he said, no longer got a coach. Would you be interested in coming to Sydney talking to us? And that was the start. And what impressed me was they basically knew what they wanted, knew what they were looking for. Whether I was the right person or not, that was irrelevant. The fact was that at least they knew what they were looking for. And I thought, that's strange. That's the first time that a club's actually told me why they want me and what type of a coach they're looking for, rather than just get whoever's available or, someone that's been recommended to them. So I went to Sydney, and it was a big gamble. I remember I worked for a newspaper group, and I was on big money. I was a senior executive earning, a substantial amount of money at that time. And I went to Sydney for half the money, half the amount. And my wife told me at that stage, she said, "You are the most optimistic person that I know, or the biggest fool that I've met." And I said, "Look, that's life. Let's give it a go. I want this. I believe in the team." When I looked at the names, and I know that these names sound big now, but in those days they probably weren't big. But yes. Popovic, Kalac, Zdrilic, Milicic, Babic, they were just some of the players. And I thought the young players, they're exactly the type of players that I loved working with. I also knew of a couple of other players like Petkovic and Kuprishak, who were older players, and I thought, gee, that's a good mix. And if we can, create again a good environment, a good atmosphere where we enjoy working and playing with each other, there's a good chance we can create. So it was a no-brainer. I went there, and in the first year, we were very unlucky not to have won the league. We were leading, I think, until the last game of the season, and we finished third, but only by a point behind Adelaide City and Melbourne Knights. But we were very, very good that year. The second year, we finished in the finals, but we were robbed in the finals because three of our best players, Milicic, Moric, and Babic, had to go with the Olympic team, and we just couldn't replace them. We didn't have the depth to replace them, and we lost in the final. But then the third year was sensational. We still hold the Australian record of being the only team in Australian professional football, to have won 9 games in a row. I know there's been teams who've been undefeated for longer periods, but no one's ever won 9 in a row. And Sash, there were scores like we beat Zoran Matic's team that were outstanding, who won the Australian Cup 7-0. Yep. We beat Canberra 7-2, Adelaide 4-0, Brisbane 4-0. Macone smashed them, by big margins. So we were just not just a pretty a team that played good football, but we played winning football that created a lot of interest amongst even neutral supporters. Yep. There was even a poll here in Sydney with a radio station that they wanted to know who was the most popular sporting team in Sydney. And believe it or not, Sydney United was the most popular sporting team, in spite of Sydney being a rugby league or town, and that Sydney Swansea and so forth. So we were an exceptional team, and unfortunately for us, towards the end of the season, we started having few issues where the club was going to get kicked out of the league because of some crowd trouble against South Melbourne at Parramatta Stadium. And then our players started being poached almost from the halfway mark of the season. And by the time we played the grand final, half of our team had already been earmarked to be elsewhere. And really, that wasn't a true show of what we were capable of. But nevertheless, it was a remarkable team. And some of those names some of those players went on to become household names.
Yeah, so I think that year you played definitely the most attractive football. Obviously, you went on to win the NSL championship in 96-97. But that year that you guys lost to Brisbane, that was I think on that day you guys on paper had the better side, but I think that they wanted it more on the day. Obviously, this is now the 1%ers about coach, but you had some fantastic players, people that went on to, I think at one stage you had 6 or 7 Australian national team players in your side.
Yeah.
So if you can't win the league with 6 or 7 national team players, I mean, you got a problem, right? So you had the cattle. But you also played very attractive football, and that's why maybe you were voted as one of the most popular sides in Sydney. So fantastic era there. Even you talk about like Manus Lamond at the end of his career, but the younger boys coming in. I think Robbie Innes was there.
Yeah, we brought in Robbie Innes and Robbie Trokowski from Melbourne.
Yeah.
We didn't buy too many players, but what we did buy were quality young players.
Yeah.
And look, one of the reasons why Sydney United was strong even after a host of us left was because we had a huge squad of young players coming through. I was the football director as well as the head coach, and my job was in those days to look after the youth teams, the Colts team, all the junior teams, and appoint all the coaches. And we, back in those days, wanted all our youth coaches to play the same way the senior team played. And we ensured that the type of players we picked were based on not how tall or how big they were, but how technically capable they were. So we started preparing for that, a few years earlier. And, when you look at some of the other names that came through, Ante Seric went on and played for Hajduk Split, Croatian national team. Jacob Burns came through that team. My two sons, Jason and Dean, both came through that. Eddie Bosner came through that system.
Was Tim Cahill there for a short period?
No, Tim Cahill had left before I joined the club.
Right.
So we had a host of players who later on, even when I left to join Canberra and Sydney Olympic, they still, Ante Moric was another one. They Mark Cruden, Joe Vikic, Richard Plesha, they went, for another couple of years. Yeah.
And absolutely.
So, but as I said, it wasn't an accident. We planned for that. We made sure we had the right coaches in place, the right programs, and of course, let's not forget that clubs like Sydney United, South Melbourne, Melbourne Knights, Marconi, they had that culture as well. That when you went to those clubs, you were expected to win, but also to go on and to become better than when you joined those clubs. And when people ask me, what is it made Sydney United so successful? Well, it's all of those things. It's what Sydney United brought to the table, but also how we prepared.
But now you're becoming, I would say, you're in the middle of your coaching career. Now you're becoming a coach. You're making statements in the media. You're playing the psychological games. I remember there was once a this is about the 1%. It's not just what happens in the 90 minutes of the game. The 41st, 45, what you say at halftime, and the last 45. The football battle happens throughout the week. It happens in the media. It happens, and how do you motivate each of your players to get up when not all players are playing fully fit? Sometimes they're carrying injuries. How you get them through you rest them and you get them up for games. These are all the things that a first-team coach needs to deal with. So your mind is racing 24/7. Yeah, you're thinking about the game, on how to improve your side. But would you say that this is now the period of time you've sacrificed the wages in Melbourne to move to Sydney on half the money to take this job, but now you're coming within your element as a coach?
Yeah, look, let's not forget that back in those days, it was much tougher to be head coach of a team than it is nowadays, because back in those days, you were lucky if you had an assistant coach. That was it, But nowadays, you've got an assistant coach, goalkeeping coach, half a dozen assistant coaches, so to speak. I'm exaggerating, but I'm not far off. Yeah. So it's a lot easier. Today, you're more of a manager than a coach. In those days, you were a manager, you were a coach. I remember I had a squad of 30. At 30 players training, And I remember saying to my president at one stage, I can't handle this. Most other teams are carrying only 20 players. I'm carrying 30. He said, Branko, one day it will pay off for us. And he was spot on. He did. You know, but it was hard work. It's hard to keep 30 players motivated. Your senior players are telling you, why are these youngsters, what are they doing here? They don't belong here. And you're having to explain that they are the future of the club. We need them. They need to learn off someone and so forth. So when you got 30 and then on a match day, you've only got, you can only choose 16 or 11 to start off. It's a lot of hard decisions to make, but that was part of the responsibilities. And as I said, I was very fortunate that I had good people around me, but back in those days, it was certainly a lot harder because you didn't have the so-called support staff and sports science that you have today. You know, I was very big on tactics back in those days. And, I had to do it all by myself. I didn't have assistants. I didn't have an analyst who would prepare the information for me, and I'd just go out and in front of tell the players before a game or before a training session. You had to prepare it. You had to find it, prepare it, and deliver it all on your own.
You're doing the man management. You're placing the cones. You're running the drills. When somebody's mucking around in the back corner, you're pulling him into line. It's a big job, right? Anyone who's been a coach, the minute it gets bigger than 22, right, it's hard to manage a session, right? So I take my hat off for you, sir. That side was quality. The names that we've just dropped, they've gone on to coach some of the best teams in Australia and some of them now overseas. I think Julic is the assistant in the MLS. He's got a job up there, so I'm sure they learned something from you. But then the following.
Look, just on that, sorry, that's an interesting one you bring up because maybe we could have touched on it later. But just looking at the A-League as it is, some of the coaches that are coaching there. From that Sydney United, but there's from other teams that I coached as well. You had obviously Tony Popovic, who was coaching Perth Glory and Western Sydney, but now has gone to Greece. He was one of them. Ante Milicic, Mark Rudin, David Strulic is overseas.
Yep.
Later on, I coached at Sydney FC, where we had Steve Corica and Dufu Tale. Corica is now coaching Sydney FC. Tale is coaching Wellington.
Yep.
Yeah. So they were just some of the players that, have come through either Sydney United or some of the other clubs that I've coached. But that Sydney United in particular side, a lot of them went on and not played for their countries, but went into the coaching ranks. Zelko Kalac is another one, goalkeeping coach and coach of Sydney United. So there's many of them who, I'm going to do better than my coach, Branko Culina, and I'll show how it really should be done.
Yeah, and this is the point. It's about, we all stand on somebody else's shoulders, okay? So, you were inspired by a Billy Wojtek. Maybe you went on to inspire one or two others, right? So, So this is the interesting thing about the evolution of the game, but not to forget that football is football, very simple, score one more goal than the opposition, right? But then there are layers underneath. Once you understand, get into coaching, the layers of the complexity, the game within the game, these are the things now that become more and more difficult. Anyone who's been a coach who loves coaching understands the complexity, the simplicity of the game, obviously, right? As a spectator, you sit back and watch, but then the complexity as a coach to understand how to win those little one-on-one battles to give yourself the 1%, 2%, 3% better chance to score a goal. So this is now what people write books and spend hours thinking about the 90 minutes on the weekend. So, but you then, after that fantastic job, you went and coached the bottom side. Right? Like, what was that? Like, you took you're coaching the pinnacle of Australian football, and then you go off to Canberra, and I think they were last for a couple of years. Why did you make that call?
Let's just say that sometimes you make weird decisions in life, and that was one of them. But there was madness behind that, and um, the I remember after Sydney, the grand final, I was assigned to go to Malaysia for the World Cup, Under-20s Cup, as an assistant coach for the Australian Under-20 team. And the brief was that that after I came back, that if there's a chance I would be the national coach, senior national coach. Because at that time, Australia was looking for was about to embark, looking for a new coach. David Hill was at the helm, and he felt that if I went to a club that was seen more purely as an Australian club rather than an ethnic club, there might be a better chance of me, or better acceptance. And being probably a bit youngish, foolish, I took that on board. But in hindsight, there's no doubt that I made a mistake, and I should have continued on with Sydney United.
Okay, but I don't think it's a mistake, because you haven't been a coach unless you've coached the bottom side. Very easy. I used to jokingly say, Jeff Kennett in the 90s could coach South Melbourne, right? No disrespect to whoever was the coach at that time, right? But unless you've coached a bottom side where you haven't got the cattle to do the job, right? And then you take them from here to here, that's when you know you're a coach. To improve a team that, because once you start losing, it's not just about the quality of the players. Psychologically, they lose it. To then turn it around, requires...
Sash, logically, I think I agree with what you're saying, because the hardest coaching job I ever had was Canberra Cosmos, because it was a team of losers who were bottom of the table for the previous 2 years and hardly won a game. I think the year I took over, they had finished some 15 points behind second last. So, obviously it wasn't a very good team. And I remember the first 4 or 5 games of the season, I thought, oh my God, how can I turn this around? How can we even win a game? So I tried every trick in the book that I knew in all my coaching experience to put into place to try and help us. So yes, that did make me a better coach. However, if you look at it from the outside, that wasn't a very smart move. Because if you want to get ahead in this game, people don't judge you on how good a coach you are, but how successful you are. Oh. And if you look at someone like Ange Postecoglou at that time, he took over from Frank Arrock, a top side, and they won 2 championships. How much of that was Ange Postecoglou? How much was that Frank? But they were a top side, and when people start counting what you won, they're not interested in how good you coached. I thought the best I ever coached was probably Sydney Olympic. A couple of years later, when I had a troubled side that I had to put together, and not only a troubled side, but a troubled board of directors, supporters who were very demanding. Yet I thought I coached my best football at that time. But no one looks at that. They only look at the championships that you won. And for that reason, Canberra was was definitely a bad move.
So, look, I think the people who don't understand football only look at win-loss ratios, okay? But however, the people who really, really understand football, people involved in boards and the deeper level, okay, they understand. If they're entrenched in the game, they understand the nuances, because it's hard. The guy who's taking the job, not everybody can coach Melbourne City or Sydney FC this year. Somebody needs to coach, right? No disrespect, but Central Coast. And taking that Central Coast job today, that's a tough job, okay? Doesn't matter who you are.
Yes.
You got lower budget, you got people, maybe the cattle on the park, the marquee money's not there, all those things. It's a tough job. And turning that around and then taking the game to a big club is a tough job. So you need to respect anyone who's been a coach and understands has coached the bottom side, right? It's not the mark of a coach a win-loss record, right? It's the ability, what is the improvement you get, okay? Can you take let's say, for example, like what Rudin did at Wellington, mid-table, then to finish, and then to then lose the whole squad, and then Tale to do it double down and do it again. This is what I look at, okay? So on paper, what are they doing, and then deliver at the end.
I think also you've got to do it over a period of time. I think we get carried away these days, and just because you have one good season, people think, oh, that's it. You know, whether you're a player or a coach, I think it's the length of that period of time as a player. For me, a good player is not one that plays one good game and then that's it, or one good season. A good player is that plays successively good games or successive seasons. A good coach is one that has continued improvement in his team over a period of time, not just 1 year or 2 years. But look, as I said earlier, probably the finest moments in my career were where I had less success as far as on winning is concerned, but I had more success in improvement. Those was Newcastle Jets. When I took over in the A-League, you know, they finished bottom of the table the year before, and in my first season we finished fourth. So, you know, taking a bot that's finished bottom to fourth, who had no money, is probably a greater achievement than going to a club that's already up there, playing resources. So, yeah, but unfortunately, Sash, there's a lot of people out there that don't know the game. They don't look at that bottom line, and they only look how many games you win or how many games you lose. They don't look at the improvement. They don't look at the resources that you're working with, and so forth. But people that understand the game, I think, would appreciate that.
Yeah, so interesting. Obviously, you touched on the fantastic job you did at Newcastle, right? So you're talking about earlier about, you know, was it better to be liked or respected? And like you rightly said, you know, you've got your intimate family, your wife, children, your grandchildren. That's now your inner sanctum. Then you have some close friends around, and football, right? You've coached many players, many teams. You're there to do a job, okay? You do it to the best of your ability, and yes, you'll be respected out of how you treat people and how you interact with people. Obviously, you need to have the utmost respect for everybody else, but you're there to do a job, okay? And being a boss of first team, doesn't matter at what level, it's not easy. You've got to cut players. You've got to explain to somebody that they're not going to play this week, right? You're dealing with egos. It's a tough stance. So I take my hat off to you. I want to touch on, because you were at Sydney FC and you played in the Asian Champions League. That would have been a fantastic experience.
It was unbelievable. It was the very first time the Australian team had played in the Asian. Difficult way to prepare because you didn't know what to expect. And I remember the board of directors telling me, as long as you go to China, our first game was against Shanghai in Shanghai. As long as you don't get smashed, we'll be happy. You know, we'll be right. We'll be okay. And we went there, and you know, it was just an amazing night. We won the game 2-1 with some terrific goals. Yeah, 2 goals, 2-1 by goals by Coric and Tale, and they were actually screamers as well.
Yeah.
And then we played Urawa Reds, who were unbelievable side at that time, loaded with Brazilians and Japanese internationals.
Yeah, they had the owner.
Mind you, back in those days, we had a salary cap of 1.2 million.
Yes.
And I remember Washington, who played for Urawa Reds, a Brazilian striker, national team player, he was on 3 million a season on his own. and our whole salary cap was 1.2 million. And we were 2-0 up in Sydney in front of about 20,000 people on a Wednesday night, and then they clawed the way back and drew 2-2. But the interesting game was in Tokyo,
Yep.
in front of 55,000 people, and
the
winner goes through because there was no second place. Yeah. And 2.5 hours before the game, we got there and the stadium was full, and they were just chanting, all dressed in red and white of the Uraba.
Yeah.
It was just and unfortunately for us, David Zdrulic had great opportunity to score midway through the first half with a header from only a couple of meters out.
Yes.
Yeah. He missed that, and in the end, the game went on to nil or draw. But we had to win. That draw was enough for them on goal difference. But it was just a fantastic. I had goosebumps because the crowd, I have never ever seen anything like it before. They were chanting and singing for the best part of 4.5 hours, 2.5 hours before the game and 2 hours during the game and after the game. It was just unbelievable. And we ended up missing out on goal difference, but it was a fantastic achievement by a team that didn't know what to expect, conditions, preparation, style of play or anything. And that was probably another very, very satisfying time in coaching.
Yeah, so obviously, your personal honours, Victorian Coach of the Year in 1992, NSL Coach of the Year, the 96-97 season with Sydney United, obviously. But, we talk about why we're behind Japan, right? Look at just the passion of the fans, okay? They're chanting for 4 hours and we are now playing in COVID empty stadiums. The effort that the Japanese players will do in the course of a week. How many touches do they get on the ball? How many sessions do they do compared to our boys? When it goes to the top level, right, we're going to be 10-15% below them because the football factory underneath isn't producing like the Japanese are, right? So I think we've got a lot to learn from our counterparts in Japan on what they're doing, and some ideas what we need to do. And that's why I want to shift gears, because you've had some serious roles. You were TD at Newcastle. You were the TD at Football New South Wales. So you've had many senior roles. But I want to talk about now these ones where you can start influencing top-down grassroots football, right? What was your ideas in these roles that we need to instill? Because you produced an Ollie Root, you two boys, you produced an Ollie Root, okay, and a Socceroo, okay, in the backyard, right? So when you had these bigger jobs to then go on and influence now the masses, because the average coach is like me, yeah? A parent sticks up his hand and goes and puts cones down and balls and play. In those roles, how can we start influencing the education process, the system, so we start now producing more Jason Colinas, more Ned Zellichers, more Tony Popoviches, more Steve Corikas, all these players that you coached in your time?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest hurdle that I faced was the politics. I remember coming to Football New South Wales in my first year, and going before the board, Football New South Wales board, and giving them a briefing of what my intention was to do to change the game in New South Wales. And one of those was to introduce small-sided games, because in those days we didn't have small-sided games. That was you had your under sixes playing full field, etc., and so forth. So I thought, no, one of the best ways is to. So I prepared a brief on how we can introduce small-sided games, how players were to get more touches on the ball, they would enjoy the game more and so forth. And it went down well with half the board. The other half of the board that was run by different faction, association clubs, they said, no, we've been doing it this way for 32 years. Why should we change now? And I said, well, if we want to, about a year later or so, Football Federation appointed technical director. One of his first recommendations.
This is why I was. This is a fantastic idea, because when I started playing football as an under-10, right, and we would, I think the only modification is where you took the corner from. You took it from the edge of the 18-yard box instead of. But there were times that you beat the other team and they couldn't cross the halfway line, right? So, and you got this little goalkeeper in the big goals, right? How are they going to catch the ball? So it's this idea of small-sided games are fantastic. Okay, so what about this idea of developing the Australian, because obviously it's built on grassroots. The average player plays for Timbuktu United, somewhere in Australia. Parents, the coach. How do we ensure that we are getting kids to love the game? All right, first, enjoy it, and then slowly build up the layers so that at the top we're producing, like I said, the Zelichers, the Culinas, the Corikas, and the like.
Yeah, look, I think one of the problems that our game lacks is identity. Over many years, we've gone from being regarded as an English type of football country back in the 60s, 70s or whatever. Then we thought, okay, that ain't quite working. Let's follow someone else. Then we thought, the Dutch seem to be playing good, attractive football. Let's be like the Dutch. Then we tried to be like the Dutch. And then the French won a World Cup, and they thought, let's be like the French. Let's be like the Brazilians and all of that. And to me, that's one of the biggest problems that we have in this country. We get influenced too much by people in the media and people who don't understand the game of what we should be like. I remember when my son Jason was playing overseas, and I would be talking to the world leaders in football, people who were in very respectable positions, and I'd ask them, what is it about Australian players that they look for? Because when Jason went overseas, he went to Ajax Amsterdam. Ajax Amsterdam at that time had just won the European Cup, which is, Champions League. That's a big thing to achieve. And one of the things they always kept telling me about Australian players is the Australian mentality, the work rate, the physical part aspect of the game, and so forth. And I thought, okay, fine. What we in Australia are trying to do is, instead of incorporating the best of what we have, which is the physical part, the work rate, the discipline, and so forth, and then taking in a little bit of the flair that the South Americans have, a little bit of the tactical that the Europeans have, and putting it all together and then saying, this is the Australian way. No, we tend to follow one particular country for a few years, and then when that's out of favour, we move on to another one. Hey, you can't be a Brazilian. You don't have the Brazilian mentality. You don't have the Brazilian experience, or the Italian, let's be who we are. We're Australian. We're multicultural. We're all of those. Yeah. Let's be the best we can be, but be Australian, incorporating a little bit of the European tactics, a little bit of the South American flair, a little bit of that English, UK, British aggression and mentality, and let's make it the Australian way. By doing that, we have our own style. We have something then that we can copy from youth to seniors and teach our players as they're growing up how to play. Not Victoria one way, New South Wales another, and so forth, but the whole way through. It's the Australian way.
So if you look back at what makes every good Socceroo side, like if you go from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, 2000s, and now even today, right? What is being consistent, okay? The boys work, okay? I think if you look at the statistics of now the World Cups that we play in, we run as hard as any other team, okay, in terms of meters covered, you know, like those accelerated sprints, all that, we're right at the top, okay? That's something that we embrace. I think we should embrace because that's who we are, okay? We work harder than the average club. Are we going to, average country? Are we going to be as technically as brilliant as the Spanish or the Argentinians? The answer is no. And it's okay. I think we're still a developing country. We need to understand where we are in the frame of the world. How can we utilize our work rate, a tenaciousness, a bit of grunt, okay? And then, yes, we're still going to play football when we get the ball, okay? When we get the ball, we're going to try and score. So I think this is the Australian way. And yeah, I wouldn't say that we've lost that, but I think the focus now is to shy away from that aggression. Okay, so if I look at, let's say, for example, many TDs, you know, in the grassroots level, it's okay, just get the kids to play. All right, gets the kids to play. And they get to the highest level, they're going to get eaten. If you just come there today, somebody comes and you're going to try to take their position just because you're technically gifted, it's not going to work, okay? You need to have a certain level of work rate, tenaciousness. Everything makes a footballer, not just technique, right?
And that's what I was implying to earlier by saying that we in Australia should take advantage of the multicultural society that we are and take in the best of what the world has got to offer. And, you know, if we want to be at the top country, then that's what we need to do. But I also believe that we tend to leave it late as well. For example, by the age of 12, our players in Australia already should be technically and tactically sound, more than sound. But in most cases, we don't even, we hardly touch those areas. Now, when I go overseas and I see a 10-year-old in Croatia, for example, training 5 days a week, playing the 6th day, and already is more advanced at 10 years of age in tactical part of the game, 14 years of age. What said we at their level? If they've already 4 years ahead from the age of 10 to 10 years of age. So we need to match it in some areas with what the rest of the world are doing, but we also must hang on to some of the qualities that we already possess and that is made us wanted around the world. Because let's not forget that back in 2006, the Australian team that played in Germany, yes, every one of the starting 11 played in one of the top divisions in Europe. 100%. Okay, and that's what we need. That's what we need to aim for, and we need to go back to and say, how did we produce these players? How did these players come about? How can we replicate that so that we can again have our national team playing at the highest possible level?
And you look now at our national team, right? How in the top divisions, how many have we got? You can't even count on the one hand, right? So not the 11, right? Like, you know, now people are moving. So, you know, literally, you can't even feel one hand. But this is now the challenge, right, of the first team.
Yeah. I think the challenge is to put our players in a position where they can play week in, week out against the very best in the world. If we want to be a very good footballing country that's going to be successful even at World Cups, then we've got to have players who are playing at the highest level week in, week out. Not players who are playing second or third division in UK or in Europe, lower leagues and so forth. Because when it comes to the crunch time, they just won't have the experience. Sure, they might, put in one occasional good game, but consistently they will not be able to achieve what's required of them to go on and play quarterfinal or semi-final football at the elite level. And again, it all starts early in their careers. You know, one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of having a second division here in Australia is to give more coaches, more players the opportunity to be playing at a higher level, so that the national team will have a greater choice to choose from rather than where it is at the moment. So the sooner we start addressing these problems at an earlier age, the sooner we will have a better national team and a better domestic competition.
So you're obviously, I remember, you know, you've got a wealth of knowledge. You're still involved in the game. I think you're at giving some advice to a private school to how to implement football. Is that what the job that you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm involved with the private school. Mind you, private schools these days are a lot more advanced than what they were a while back. And in fact, you'd be amazed at how many good players you can see at school level these days that are not playing maybe elite football, which they should be, because for whatever reason, it's I think it's been made harder for them to combine education and sport and football. And I think that's needs to be changed as well, because there are some elite footballers who are also very well educated people, and that we need to provide them with opportunities. But my role is to assist them and provide them more or less coach the coaches, so that the coaches are better prepared, better organized, and can assist their teams better. So I'm still involved, but really the important thing would be for the Football Federation of Australia to start implementing throughout the states, various states, programs that everybody would be on the same page. And that way, all our players are being educated and our coaches in a similar way. And, you know, we talk about this curriculum that we've got at the moment. Is it right or wrong? And it's a guideline. We need to provide guidelines, but we need also to have coaches who will be prepared to put in their own ideas and implement their experiences. Because I still find, particularly with that younger age, that the best coaches for those players who want to be elite players are ex-players, players who have finished their careers but have still got a lot to offer. And not everyone can be a manager at one of the A-League clubs, but there's no reasons why we can't keep a lot more ex-players in the game at youth level, at grassroots level, and even at senior level. And those ex-players are the key to producing better youth players and developing them, particularly up to the age of 12 years of age.
Yes. So what advice do you have to that, that junior coach, that he's put up his hand? He might be a parent of one of the kids in the team. That's probably 80% of the coaches in the country. If you look at grassroots, junior level, it's probably up to a certain level. It's some dad, right? He's put up his hand, and now he's got the balls and the cones. So what advice do you have for them in taking their footballing journey? Maybe they've played the game, and then now they're running their sessions.
Look, because of Australia's great number or large number of participants, it's always going to be difficult to get good coaches for every team. However, in the top 20%, we've got to try and get better coaches, because I'm still seeing very poor coaching at the so-called elite level. And that's what worries me, because if we don't have quality coaching at the elite level, what hope have we got for the future? What hope have those players got if they are not being properly taught? So because of the large numbers, that's always going to be a problem getting enough. But I just don't think we're utilising what we have. You know, when you look at some of the clubs, whether it be Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, how many ex-players, how many senior coaches who are around that are doing nothing? Too many. Because clubs are reluctant to involve those kind of people. And unless you get them involved, you're missing out on huge amount of experience and knowledge. And therefore, we're getting people who have limited experience, fathers and mothers in some cases, who are taking on the role of a coach when they're not prepared for it and don't quite understand it. And that's been a real problem for us. Sure, we're always going to require those kind of coaches because of all the participation numbers that we have. But at least at the elite level, we should have better quality and better trained coaches than what we have at the moment. For example, our coaching courses are too long, too expensive, too difficult. We should have a lot more coaches. Coaches shouldn't be paying exorbitant amount of money to get their licenses to coach. And not only that, but a lot of the times they don't even coach because there's no jobs for them. We should make it a lot easier for them. And until we do that, we will struggle. We'll struggle with getting quality coaches for quality teams. And until we do that, we will continue to have difficulties.
And the final point I want the advice, because I think one of the aspects of why I remember watching Jason at high school. We went to the same high school, and we were at Altona City's ground, and we were playing in a school game, and he scooped the ball up. He was just on the circle, in the middle of the park. He scooped up the ball. He flicked it twice. Boom, boom. I think he was in his 7. So I was in year 12. He's in his 7 or 8. It's roughly the age difference. And he pinged it, right, from the halfway line, and he popped it in, right? And we were like, wow, right? So this boy can play. But I know that he would have looked to his older brother, Dean, and always tried to compete. You know what I mean? Dean being a head bigger, and Jason now trying to tackle. What advice have you got to that player who has the aspiration to play at the highest level?
Look, I was a great believer in Australian football and still am. But the more I see the way things are being run, the more I'm tempted to encourage players to leave the country, which is sad to say, because I honestly believe that if we want to produce a player that's going to play for Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, Liverpool, one of the big clubs in some of the big clubs in each sees earlier. The reason being is that they are not being taught the things in Australia that they need to have to play at the top level. Sure, we will have players who will go to, some clubs and play for middle range. But if we want to have players playing at the highest level, you look at Croatia, for example. Croatia is a small country of 4 million people. But you know what? Their national team players play for Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, all these clubs. That's what we have to aspire to. Can we do it at the moment with the Australian way, the way the Australian game is being run? No, I don't think so. What needs to change is that, again, we need to provide better coaching at an earlier age with better guidelines for the coaches. For example, you mentioned about something Jason did when he was in year 7 or whatever it was. Well, that was an accident. There's no accident. We kept practicing that in his spare time, away from club football. We would go 2-3 times a week, if not more, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, practicing that extra little bit, where I encouraged flair, where I encouraged people to express themselves. Because the only way you're going to get any better than be a robot is to be able to go out there and work on it and practice and practice and practice and have the freedom to express yourself.
Yep.
Until we do that, we will not be able to match it with the very best in the world. And so my advice is quite simple. If you've got aspirations of being playing at elite football and an elite club, go out there and practice as much as you can and be free to try things out, express yourself, give it a go. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because without mistakes, there is no, there's no perfection, but certainly no improvement either. So, if you want to play at the higher level, then you've got to do all of those things, because you can dream, but your dreams will only take you so far if you don't put in the hard work.
Fantastic, wise words. Branko Culina, it's been an absolute pleasure talking football. You're still involved in the game. Wealth of experience. Like I said, not only have player honours as a player, coach, technical director, in the backyard produced 2 boys that represented our country. So we've done a fantastic job. And then now they've gone on to coach sides. So they're carrying on to the tradition. But you still have a wealth of experience to share for all of us junior coaches to hopefully get something out of this fantastic conversation. So thank you very much for your time and your knowledge, sir.
My pleasure.